For decades, one single currency has pretty much ruled the entire global economy. But now, with rising debts and new rivals on the scene, its reign is being questioned like never before. So let's dive into the surprisingly resilient story of the US dollar's empire.
Okay, so this is the question, right? It's on everyone's mind, from central bankers to regular folks investing for their future. The headlines are just buzzing with this phrase, de-dollarization. So are we really watching the beginning of the end for the dollar?
And this isn't just talk. We're seeing major emerging economies. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. You'll hear them called the BRICS nations. They are openly and very seriously discussing new ways to trade with each other that completely bypass the dollar.
And look, this is way more than just a bunch of meetings. We're talking about key geopolitical players taking actual, concrete steps. More and more trades are being settled in their own local currencies, and you can see their central banks actively moving reserves away from dollar-based assets. Seriously, there's a real movement starting to take shape here.
Okay, before we get any further, let's make sure we're on the same page about what we mean. This term, dollar hegemony, it isn't just about the dollar being popular. It's about it being the fundamental plumbing of the whole global financial system. And that right there is what's at stake.
All right, so let's dig into that. What are the forces that are actually putting cracks in this financial empire? What's really driving this big push for an alternative?
It really is a perfect storm of different factors all hitting at once. On one hand, you've got growing worries about America's own economic health, especially with its massive national debt. Then, on the other hand, there's the way the dollar system is used to enforce powerful financial sanctions. And that, you can imagine, makes other countries pretty nervous about being so dependent on it.
So here's the big paradox, right? If the system has all these issues, all these vulnerabilities, why is the dollar still king? Well, to answer that, we've got to rewind the clock and see how this empire was actually built.
Yeah, the dollar's power didn't just happen by accident. It was forged in the aftermath of a world war and then built up layer by layer for almost a century. Its foundation? It's not just about economic might. It's about a deep historical legacy of trust.
And this timeline kind of lays out the whole journey for us. It all kicks off with the Bretton Woods Agreement back in 1944, which officially crowned the dollar as the world's go-to reserve currency. But then, even after the US dropped the gold standard in '71, this petrodollar system came into play. It basically made it so you had to use dollars to buy oil, which locked in its dominance even tighter.
And all of this creates this wild, self-reinforcing loop. I mean, think about it from a country's perspective. You need dollars to buy essential stuff, like oil. So what do? You have to keep a huge stash of dollars in your reserves. And what do you do with that giant pile of cash? Well, you invest it in safe U.S. assets. We're talking trillions of dollars held by foreign governments in U.S. Treasury bonds. And that, in turn, just makes the U.S. financial system stronger and reinforces the dollar's top spot. It's a really powerful cycle.
So this entire system gives the United States some very real, very tangible power. This dominance isn't just some fancy title. It comes with what you could almost call financial superpowers.
I mean, just take a look at this. This is what the world's central banks are holding in their vaults. And despite all the chatter about change, the US dollar still makes up the lion's share of global reserves. It's not even close. The dollar is basically the world's default savings account.
And we're not just talking about savings here. When a company in Japan wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, guess what currency they're using? It's almost always going to be US dollars. It's the universal language of global business.
So what does all this power actually get you? Well, for starters, it means the US can effectively cut entire countries off from the global financial system using sanctions. It also means the rest of the world has a huge constant demand for US debt, which lets the American government borrow money way more cheaply than pretty much anybody else.
But of course, there's a flip side to this coin. For every other country out there, this deep reliance on the dollar creates a huge risk. Their economic stability can be rocked by policy decisions made thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C. And honestly, that's a vulnerability a lot of countries are getting pretty tired of.
Okay, so this all brings us right back to that huge question we started with. Given all the pressure and all the power at play, what does the future of money actually look like?
So what's next? Well, most experts see it playing out in one of four ways. First, things could just stay as they are, the status quo, mostly because there isn't a good alternative. Second, we could see a gradual diversification, which is kind of what's happening now, countries slowly chipping away at their dollar holdings.
Third, we could get a fragmented system, where currencies like the euro or the yuan become dominant in their own parts of the world. And finally, there's the disruptive shift. But that would probably take a massive global crisis to really shatter everyone's trust in the dollar all at once.
And this is really the bottom line, the most important takeaway here. Replacing the dollar isn't like switching your phone brand. Any challenger doesn't just have to be good, it has to be backed by a financial system that is deeper, more open, and more trusted than the one the world has been using for over 75 years. Take the euro, it doesn't have a single unified government bond market like the US does. And China? Huge economy for sure, but its government has strict controls on its currency, which is a big turnoff for global investors. That is a huge mountain to climb.
So no, the empire isn't going to crumble overnight, but the challenges are very real and the rivals are getting more and more organized. The dollar's throne is safe, for now. The real question is, for how much longer?